The air in the garage was a thick cocktail of memory and chemicals, mineral spirits, hot metal, and the faint sweet bite of high-octane gasoline. Jack Sullivan inhaled it deeper than the manufactured freshness of his Manhattan apartment. To anyone else, it was blue-collar grime. To him, it was honesty, a legacy forged in sweat and steel. His hands, calloused, permanently inked with fine black grease lines no industrial soap could fully erase, moved with surgeon precision over the chrome fender of a 1957 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing. In the warped reflection, his face tightened into pure concentration. Ethereal Automotive was his sanctuary, a place where time didn't pass. It was rewound, polished, perfected. To the world, and especially to Meredith, he was only the shop's manager, a man making a respectable but modest salary, trapped in New York's perpetual struggle. He'd built the story carefully, double shifts, greasy side jobs, a life always one surprise bill from disaster, because scarcity kept her expectations low and his surprise intact. The truth lived behind that roll-up door. Jack was the sole, anonymous owner of Ethereal Automotive Restoration, revered among elite collectors whose billionaires, moguls, and discreet royals wired 7 figures without blinking. The side jobs were Geneva meetings, Dubai transfers, rare parts sourced from forgotten barns in Italy, a hidden empire in Queens worth a conservative $75 million. Every lie was aimed at one clean, tender finish line, erasing the $85,000 in credit card and student loan debt hanging over Meredith like a storm cloud, then handing her the paid-in-full statement on their anniversary, proof that his grease-stained hands could build her a castle. The battered 1985 Ford F-150 sat in the corner like a defiant monument. Its cherry-red paint was faded and chipped to grey primer, a roadmap of a life lived without apology. Inside, it smelled of old vinyl, sun-baked dust, and the lingering ghost of his grandfather's cigar, enough to turn Jack 10 years old again, proud in the passenger seat, feet barely reaching the floor. Every dent carried a story, every scratch a memory. The truck was his philosophy made metal. Value was utility, reliability, and the love poured into maintenance, not the status it conferred. Meredith despised it, called it a relic, a public confession of the life she wanted to outrun. Jack couldn't sell it. It would feel like selling his own spine. Meredith's arrivals were always a spectacle, an Uber stopping short of the oil-stained pavement as if the place could stain wealth itself. She stepped out like she belonged to another ecosystem, heels clicking an impatient rhythm against concrete, cream silk and expensive perfume momentarily overpowering the garage's honest sense. She barely looked at the cars, historic, priceless machines reduced to background noise, her focus pinning Jack with tolerance instead of affection. Her hug was careful, an air kiss aimed away from his cheek, away from oil, away from reality. "We need to talk about that thing," she said, voice dropping as if the truck might listen, her wrist flicking toward the F-150 without even naming it. "There's a charity gala next month. Preston is on the board. Everyone who is anyone will be there. I can't have people knowing my husband drives that." Preston's name landed heavy. Perfect teeth, tailored suits, effortless generational wealth, the benchmark she measured Jack against. "It's embarrassing," she pressed, sliding from dismissal into pleading. "It screams poverty. People will think we're struggling. How am I supposed to network if we can't even afford a decent car?" Jack wanted to explain the difference between price and value, to say the truck was paid for and faithful and irreplaceable. But he knew her world was built from perception and strangers' approval. He only nodded, grease under his nails suddenly feeling like shame. "We could sell it for quick cash," she added, eyes bright with the idea. "It would help with my, the debts. Always the debts, used like a blade against the very piece of him she most wanted to erase." He watched her leave, the black Uber swallowing her back into her world of glass towers and social warfare, leaving behind the lingering scent of her perfume and a profound sense of unease. He turned back to the garage, his sanctuary, but for the first time, it felt less like a fortress and more like a cage of his own making. The lie was becoming heavier with each passing day. He walked past the gull wing, past a half-restored 1967 Shelby GT500, and towards a nondescript steel door at the back of the shop. He pressed his thumb against a small, nearly invisible biometric scanner. With a quiet hiss, the heavy door unlatched, revealing not a cluttered storage room, but a sleek, climate-controlled hallway that felt like the entrance to a different dimension. The contrast was jarring. The air here was cool and filtered, silent, save for the low hum of a sophisticated HVAC system. He entered his real office, a minimalist space of glass and brushed steel that overlooked the main restoration floor through a one-way window. On one wall, a series of monitors displayed real-time stock market data and secure communications from his wealth management team in Zurich. This was the nerve center of his empire, the place where the greasy garage manager dissolved and the shrewd, meticulous businessman took over. He sat in a leather chair that cost more than the monthly rent on their first apartment and powered on his encrypted laptop. He wasn't checking on side jobs. He was authorizing the acquisition of a rare Ferrari part worth 6 figures and reviewing a forensic accounting report on a potential shell company investment. He pulled up the file that was his entire focus. The reason for this elaborate, exhausting charade. It was a folder labeled Anniversary. Inside were dozens of subfolders, meticulously documenting every wire transfer, every secret payment he had made over the past 2 years, siphoning his immense profits into a dedicated account to annihilate Meredith's debt. He looked at the final number, 85 $. It was a staggering sum, a weight that had been crushing her spirit, and he was so close to lifting it forever. He was doing this all for her, to give her the freedom and security he knew she craved. He was building her a future on a foundation of lies, praying that the truth, when it was finally revealed, would be seen as the ultimate act of love. The final payment was the most satisfying. With a few quiet keystrokes, he transferred the last $4, $7.50, from a holding account in the Cayman Islands to the last of her high-interest credit cards. A small digital confirmation popped up on the screen. Paid in full. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding for 2 years. It was done. The mountain of debt that had been the source of so many of their arguments, so much of her anxiety, was gone. It had been a complex financial ballet, moving funds through various accounts, using his business's labyrinthine structure to make the payments anonymously, ensuring no red flags were raised that might spoil the surprise. He felt a wave of triumphant relief wash over him. He had done it. He had secretly lifted the single greatest burden from her life. Now for the second part of the surprise. He opened another file, this one containing the documents for a brand new Porsche Macan, purchased outright weeks ago and currently sitting in a secure storage facility in New Jersey. It was her dream car, the one she would point out on the street with a wistful sigh. It was the perfect symbol of her new debt-free life, a sleek, powerful machine that would fit seamlessly into the world she so desperately wanted to belong to. He printed the paid in full statement, the crisp paper feeling warm and significant in his hands. He pictured the scene, their anniversary dinner at Aura, the impossibly chic rooftop restaurant she'd been hinting about for months. He would hand her the envelope. She'd open it, confused at first. Then her eyes would widen in disbelief and dawning comprehension. Tears of joy, he imagined, a torrent of gratitude and love. Then he would lead her downstairs, where the Porsche would be waiting, a giant red bow on the hood. This grand gesture would erase all her doubts, silence all her criticisms about his greasy little garage. It would prove once and for all that he could give her everything she ever wanted. It was a perfect plan, a flawless script for the rest of their lives, and as he grabbed the Porsche keys, their cold weight felt like the key to his own happiness. The drive home from Queens to their Upper East Side apartment was a journey between worlds. He left behind the tangible reality of steel and oil and entered the ethereal, abstract world of high finance and social status that Meredith called home. Their building was a monument to quiet, old money luxury, with a marble-floored lobby and a doorman who always seemed to look at Jack with a hint of pity, as if he knew Jack didn't truly belong. Jack felt a familiar twinge of being an imposter, a feeling he'd grown accustomed to over the years, but tonight it was different. Tonight, he held the keys to their real future in his pocket. The paid-in-full statement was tucked into a crisp envelope, and the small, heavy box containing the Porsche keys felt like a tangible piece of their new life. He was practically buzzing with anticipation, rehearsing the lines he would use, picturing her reaction over and over again. He let himself into the apartment, expecting to find it empty, as Meredith was usually out for after-work drinks with her colleagues. But he immediately heard her voice, light and musical, drifting from the living room. She was on the phone. A wide, genuine smile spread across his face. He could tell her now. Why wait for the anniversary? He could kick off the celebration tonight. He started to walk towards the living room, his steps light, the envelope held forward like an offering. He was about to call out her name to announce his early arrival and the incredible news he carried. But then he caught a snippet of her conversation, a single phrase that made him freeze in the hallway, his heart seizing in his chest. The words were wrapped in a tone of cruel, dismissive amusement. A tone he had never heard her use before, a tone that was about to shatter his perfectly constructed world into a million irreparable pieces. God, one more month, and the human ATM will have finally cleared my debt. The words hit him with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. Human ATM. The phrase echoed in the sudden ringing silence of his mind. It was so cold, so transactional, so utterly devoid of the love and partnership he thought they shared. He stood frozen in the dim hallway, hidden from her view, the celebratory envelope in his hand, suddenly feeling like a prop from a tragic play. Her laughter, a sound he had always cherished, now sounded brittle and sharp, like breaking glass. He pressed himself against the wall, his own home, now feeling like hostile territory. He was an intruder, listening in on a truth he was never meant to hear. He could hear the clinking of ice in a glass as she continued, her voice dripping with a casual cruelty that was more devastating than any shouted insult could ever be. He comes home smelling like an oil slick, but he's a useful fool. A useful fool. The words were a verdict, a final judgment on his love, his sacrifice, his entire identity within their marriage. Every late night at the shop, every fabricated story about a side job, every ounce of effort he had poured into building this surprise for her, it all curdled into a thick, sickening poison in his gut. He had seen himself as her partner, her protector, the man who would move mountains to give her the world. But in her eyes, he was nothing more than a tool, a machine for dispensing cash, a temporary inconvenience to be tolerated until his function was complete. The warmth of his anticipation moments before was gone, replaced by an Arctic cold that spread through his veins, a coldness that felt like death. He remained pressed against the cool plaster of the wall, his body rigid, every muscle tensed. He was trapped in a nightmare of his own making, forced to listen to the final, brutal act. "Preston has our condo in Miami Beach almost ready," Meredith chirped into the phone, and the name slammed into Jack with the force of a second tidal wave. Preston. The man with the perfect teeth and the condescending smile. It wasn't just financial opportunism, it was a deeper, more intimate betrayal. The images flooded his mind, unwanted and sickeningly clear. Meredith with Preston, laughing, touching, sharing secrets. The networking events, the late nights at the office, the business trips, it was all a lie. The entire foundation of their life together was a lie. "The second my name is clear," she went on, her voice giddy with the thrill of her impending freedom, "I'm filing for divorce and leaving this poor slob behind. He was my passport, not my destination. Passport, not my destination." She had reduced their entire marriage, their shared history, their vows, into a simple, calculated transaction. He was a means to an end, a temporary visa into a life of financial solvency, a stepping stone to be kicked away once she reached the other side. The envelope in his hand, the one containing the proof of his love and her freedom, now felt like it was burning his skin. The Porsche keys in his pocket were no longer a symbol of a bright future, but a monument to his own spectacular foolishness. He had been playing a game of love and sacrifice, while she had been playing a game of strategy and extraction, and she had just declared checkmate. A profound, hollow emptiness opened up inside him, a void where his love for her used to be. The man who had walked into this apartment moments ago, filled with hope and excitement, was gone. He had died right there in the hallway, listening to the woman he loved describe his murder. A strange, chilling calm began to settle over the raging inferno of his emotions. The initial shock, the searing pain of betrayal, began to cool and harden into something else entirely. It was a cold, clear, and focused anger, as sharp and precise as a scalpel. The grief was still there, a massive, gaping wound in his chest, but it was now encased in ice. He looked down at the envelope in his hand, the paid in full statement visible through the thin paper. He had been a fool, yes, a useful fool. But fools can learn, and a fool with a $75 million empire at his disposal could learn very, very quickly. He slowly, deliberately backed away from the living room, his movements silent and measured. He retreated to his home office, a small room at the end of the hall that Meredith rarely entered, dismissing it as the place where he did his little budgets. He closed the door with a soft, barely audible click. The sound seemed to sever the last remaining thread connecting him to the man he used to be. He didn't rip up the statement. He didn't throw the Porsche keys against the wall. Instead, he placed them carefully on his desk, side by side, like evidence at a crime scene. His mind, which moments ago was filled with romantic daydreams, was now a whirring machine of logic and consequence. She had called him a human ATM. She had used him as a passport. She had mistaken his quiet integrity for weakness, his love for stupidity. She was about to learn, in the most public and devastating way possible, that she had made a catastrophic miscalculation. The anniversary dinner at Aura was still on, but the script had changed. The grand romantic gesture he had planned was now going to be a grand theatrical demolition. He wasn't just going to end their marriage. He was going to dismantle the entire false world she had built for herself, brick by glittering hollow brick. His fingers flew across the keyboard of his encrypted laptop, no longer managing restorations, but orchestrating a different kind of project, the systematic deconstruction of Meredith Sinclair. The first call was to his personal lawyer, a shark named Marcus Thorne, who specialized in high-asset divorces and corporate litigation. Jack's voice was unnervingly steady as he explained the situation, omitting the emotional devastation and focusing solely on the strategic objectives. "I need a full forensic accounting of every dollar I've spent on her for the last 5 years, he instructed, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I want to know where every cent went. I also need surveillance. Preston, I want to know everything, their meetings, their expenses, their condo in Miami Beach. I want it all documented, high resolution, and legally admissible." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Then Marcus, who had managed Jack's discreet legal affairs for years, simply said, "Consider it done. You'll have a preliminary report in 48 hours. The next call was to the general manager of Aura, the rooftop restaurant. He confirmed their anniversary reservation, but made a significant addition. "I'll need the large projector screen you use for corporate events," Jack said smoothly, "and a technician to run a presentation from my laptop. It's a surprise for my wife. A video montage of our time together." The lie tasted like ash in his mouth, but it was a necessary part of the new architecture of his revenge. He spent the next few hours in a fugue state of cold fury, meticulously gathering his own evidence. He accessed their joint accounts, a financial farce he maintained for appearances, and downloaded years of statements, highlighting Meredith's extravagant purchases with a grim satisfaction. He found the emails, the ones where she'd referred to his garage as that greasy little hovel to her friends, the ones where she'd lamented his wonderfully authentic lack of ambition. Each piece of evidence was another stone in the foundation of the public ruin he was about to build. He was no longer Jack Sullivan, the hard-working mechanic. He was a master craftsman, but the material he was now shaping was not steel or aluminum. It was justice. For the next 2 weeks, Jack played the part of the devoted, oblivious husband with an Oscar-worthy performance. He came home at the usual time, smelling of oil and feigned exhaustion. He listened with a patient, practiced smile as Meredith talked about her day, about the unbearable incompetence of her assistants, and about the endless petty dramas of her social circle. He nodded along, his mind a million miles away, analyzing the latest surveillance photos from Marcus's team, or calculating the precise financial impact of his next move. The deception was a new kind of hell, a constant grinding act of self-control. Every loving word she offered felt like an insult, every casual touch a violation. He had to fight the urge to flinch when she kissed him goodbye in the morning, her lips tasting of lies and betrayal. He saw her now not as his wife, but as an opponent, a subject of intense and dispassionate study. He noticed things he'd been blind to before. The way her eyes would dart to her phone every few minutes. The slight, almost imperceptible smile that would touch her lips when she received a text. The way she would casually drop Preston's name into conversation, testing the waters, gauging his reaction. He saw the condescension in her every compliment. "You work so hard, honey," she'd say, ruffling his hair. And he could now hear the unspoken addendum, "for me." He was living with a ghost, the ghost of the woman he thought he had married. The apartment, once a symbol of the life they were building, now felt like a stage, and he was merely an actor waiting for his final cue. He channeled all his rage, all his heartbreak, into the meticulous preparation for the final act. The anniversary was no longer a celebration of their union. It was a deadline, a day of reckoning that was approaching with the inexorable, terrifying certainty of a tidal wave. The preliminary report from Marcus Thorne arrived in a password-protected, triple-encrypted file. It was even worse than Jack had imagined. The forensic accounting revealed a staggering pattern of deception. Meredith had shell companies, secret credit cards, and a talent for financial misdirection that would have impressed a seasoned white-collar criminal. The $85,000 he had just paid off was merely the tip of the iceberg, the debt she had allowed him to see. There was more, much more, hidden away, funding a lifestyle that even her junior PR salary couldn't begin to explain. But it was the surveillance portfolio that truly gutted him. It was a visual chronicle of her betrayal, captured in brutally sharp, high-definition detail. There were photos of Meredith and Preston at intimate dinners in dimly lit restaurants, their heads close together, her hand on his. There were pictures of them entering a boutique hotel in Soho, a place they frequented on her late nights at the office. The most damning evidence was a series of photos taken in Miami. There they were, laughing on the balcony of a sleek, modern condo overlooking the ocean, the very condo she had mentioned on the phone. In one shot, Preston had his arm wrapped around her, and she was leaning into him, her face alight with a kind of carefree joy Jack hadn't seen in years. It was the look of a woman who had finally arrived at her destination. He scrolled through the images, each one a fresh stab to his already bleeding heart. He had been funding this. His hard work, his secret empire, had been paying for her romantic getaways with another man. The human ATM had been unknowingly financing its own replacement. He closed the file, his breathing shallow. The pain was immense, but it was a clarifying pain. There could be no mercy. There could be no quiet, dignified exit. She had chosen to make their marriage a public performance, and he would ensure its ending was a blockbuster spectacle. The first thing Jack Sullivan noticed upon waking was the silence. It wasn't a peaceful quiet, but a sterile, pressurized void that seemed to be actively suppressing any sign of life. Their Upper East Side apartment was a monument to Meredith's aesthetic, a minimalist expanse of white walls, grey furniture, and polished chrome that felt less like a home and more like a high-end showroom where no one was ever supposed to get comfortable. The air, chilled to a precise 68 degrees by a silent, state-of-the-art HVAC system, carried the faint, chemical scent of an expensive reed diffuser, something with notes of white tea and bergamot that smelled like money and nothing else. He slipped out from under the impossibly high thread count Egyptian cotton sheets, careful not to disturb Meredith, who slept like a marble statue in the center of the king-sized bed. His bare feet met the cold shock of the imported Italian marble floor, the sound of his own footsteps unnaturally loud in the tomb-like stillness. He moved through the pre-dawn gloom like a trespasser, his every motion calculated to avoid leaving a trace. He knew the routine: no clothes left on a chair, no water glass left on the nightstand. Everything had its place in Meredith's meticulously curated world, and his existence within it often felt like a temporary, tolerated disruption. He looked around the master bedroom, at the single, abstract piece of art on the wall that had cost more than his first car, at the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto a cityscape of glittering, impersonal towers. There was nothing of him here, not a single photograph, not a worn book, not a comfortable, broken-in piece of furniture. It was a beautiful, cold and lonely cage, and as he navigated its pristine landscape, he felt the familiar, dull ache of a man living entirely on someone else's terms, for a purpose she couldn't possibly comprehend. He padded silently toward the walk-in closet, a space larger than his childhood bedroom, and opened the heavy, seamless door. On her side, a rainbow of designer labels, Chanel, Prada, Gucci, hung in perfect, color-coordinated rows. Her shoes were displayed on angled shelves under soft gallery lighting, a collection of stilettos and boots that looked more like architectural sculptures than footwear. His side was a small, almost apologetic corner. A few pairs of jeans, a handful of flannel shirts, and his work uniforms hung neatly, looking coarse and out of place, like weeds in a manicured garden. He reached past her silk blouses, the fabric cool and slippery against his knuckles, and grabbed the object of her constant, simmering disdain: his backpack. It was made of thick, worn brown canvas with dark leather reinforcements at the corners, a relic from a time when things were built to last a lifetime. The straps were frayed at the edges, and the heavy brass zipper made a satisfyingly loud, grinding sound when he pulled it. It smelled faintly of coffee, metal, and the mineral tang of old motor oil, the scent of his real life. He could feel Meredith stirring behind him and knew what was coming. Jack, honestly, her voice, still thick with sleep, was sharp and critical. Are you really taking that thing again? It looks like you pulled it out of a dumpster. Can't you just use the briefcase I got you for Christmas? The briefcase, an elegant leather attaché case, sat on a high shelf, unused, its pristine surface collecting a thin layer of dust. It was useless to him, a prop for a life he didn't lead. He just grunted a non-committal response, the familiar shame and defiance warring in his chest. He was enduring this, all of this, for a reason. He was the architect of a grand design, and this daily erosion of his identity was simply part of the cost of construction. If you enjoy stories of karma, hidden secrets, and the quiet power of the underestimated, subscribe now to witness how the truth always finds a way to surface. Next came the jacket. It was draped over a severe-looking chrome valet stand where it had been left the night before, an act of passive-aggressive protest on his part. It was a heavy, insulated Carhartt. The dark brown canvas faded over the years to a soft, dusty tan. The cuffs were frayed, and a constellation of dark stains, grease, oil, sealant, and God knows what else, adorned the front, a permanent record of his labor. To Jack, it was a shield. The moment he shrugged it on, its familiar weight settling on his shoulders, he felt more himself, more grounded. The jacket was honest. It didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was, a tool for a working man. Meredith sat up in bed, pulling the white duvet up to her chin as if to protect herself from the jacket's very presence. "That thing just reeks, Jack. The whole bedroom smells like your garage. It's embarrassing." She wrinkled her perfectly sculpted nose, a gesture of such profound disgust that it was almost theatrical. "What if we had an unexpected guest? What would they think? They'd think we live in a repair shop." He didn't bother to explain that the smell she found so offensive was the smell of his passion, the smell of value being created from forgotten, rusted-out pieces of history. He didn't tell her that the work that created those smells was what paid for the very valet stand. The jacket was offending for the sheets she was hiding under, for the air she was breathing. Instead, he just zipped it up, the sound of the heavy-duty zipper echoing the sound of the one on his backpack. It was another brick in the wall he was building between his two lives, a wall that was becoming higher and more fortified with every condescending word she uttered, and he knew it was a wall that would soon become completely insurmountable. His final preparation was the watch. He picked it up from the marble top of the dresser, its ticking a quiet, steady, and comforting counterpoint to the apartment's oppressive silence. It was a simple, rugged Timex expedition his grandfather had given him on his 16th birthday. The crystal was webbed with a network of tiny scratches, and the brown leather band was dark with sweat and oil, molded perfectly to the shape of his wrist. It wasn't an accessory, it was a part of him. As he began to buckle it, Meredith sighed, a long, drawn-out sound of pure exasperation. "Preston just got the most stunning Audemars Piguet," she said, her voice taking on a dreamy, reverent quality. Preston, her colleague, the man whose name she dropped into conversation with increasing frequency. "It's a Royal Oak skeleton dial. It's not just a watch, Jack, it's a statement. It tells people you've arrived. It shows you understand value, that you're a serious person." She gestured dismissively at his wrist. It just signals that you've given up. It's what a man wears when he's accepted his lot in life, is to fix things for other, more successful men. The comparison was a deliberate, calculated blow designed to wound. He felt the sting of it, a hot flash of anger that he quickly suppressed. He finished buckling the strap, the familiar worn leather, a comfort against his skin. He looked at the watch's simple, honest face. It had kept perfect time for over 20 years. It had been with him when he'd first learned to rebuild a carburetor, when he'd signed the papers for his own business, when he'd married her. It represented a legacy of reliability and integrity, values that seemed to have no currency in her world. He wondered, with a sudden, chilling clarity, if she had ever truly seen the man wearing the watch at all. He was ready. Backpack slung over one shoulder, jacket zipped, watch ticking faithfully on his wrist. He was armored in the very things she despised, ready to go to the one place he felt whole. He turned to leave without a word, his submission a strategic retreat. He knew arguing was pointless. It would only force him to defend a life he was actively pretending to live, a web of lies that was becoming more tangled by the day. "Wait!" she called out. He stopped at the bedroom door, his back to her. He heard her get out of bed, the whisper of silk as her robe moved. She appeared at his side, holding a sleek glass bottle filled with a vibrant green liquid. It was a kale and spinach smoothie, the kind she drank every morning. "Don't forget this," she said, her voice softening into a tone of patronizing care. "You need to keep your energy up for all that manual labor." She placed the cold, smooth bottle in his hand. The gesture was meant to seem loving, but he felt the condescension behind it. It was another attempt to control, to manage, to fix him, to polish the rough edges of the man she had married into something more presentable. He took it, their fingers brushing for a moment. Her hand was soft and manicured, his was calloused and rough. The contrast had never felt so vast. He walked out of the bedroom and down the long, silent hallway. The heavy front door clicked shut behind him, the sound final and absolute. He leaned against it for a second in the quiet of the corridor, the cold glass of the smoothie bottle pressed against his palm, and a single bitter thought rose to the surface. He wasn't just building her a future. He was surviving an occupation, and he was beginning to wonder what would be left of him when it was finally over. The trigger, when it finally came, wasn't a dramatic, shouted confrontation. It was quiet, casual, and 1,000 times more devastating for it. Meredith had shown up at the garage unannounced, a rare and always disruptive event. But this time, she wasn't alone. Preston was with her, looking utterly out of place in his tailored Italian suit, a stark slash of navy blue against the gritty backdrop of welders and engine hoists. He surveyed the space with an air of amused anthropological curiosity, as if he were a tourist visiting a particularly primitive village. Meredith was clinging to his arm, her laughter a little too loud, a little too bright. She was performing, and Jack was the punchline. "And this," she said, with a grand, sweeping gesture that encompassed the entire shop, "is Jack's little kingdom. Isn't it authentic?" Preston gave a tight, condescending smile. His eyes landed on the cherry-red F-150, parked in its usual spot of honor. "That's quite the classic you have there, Sullivan," he said, the word classic dripping with sarcasm. "Does it run on coal?" Meredith let out a peal of laughter, a sound that sliced through the noisy garage and straight into Jack's chest. "Oh, Preston, you're terrible," she giggled, squeezing his arm. "I keep telling him to sell it. It's a monument to going nowhere, a big red flag of financial desperation." Jack stood frozen, a heavy-duty torque wrench in his hand. The tool suddenly felt impossibly heavy, its cold, greasy steel a stark contrast to the hot volcanic rage that was building inside him. It wasn't just the insult to the truck, the tangible link to his grandfather and his own history. It was the public nature of it, the casual, cruel dismissal of his entire world, his values, his identity, delivered for the entertainment of the very man he suspected was his rival. In that moment, watching them stand there, a united front of polished arrogance and shared contempt, the carefully constructed dam of his patience didn't just crack. It was utterly obliterated, and he finally understood that he wasn't just being tolerated, he was being mocked. And the time for quiet sacrifice had just come to a violent, definitive end. The drive home was a blur of red taillights and smeared neon. Jack gripped the worn leather of the F-150's steering wheel, his knuckles white, the familiar rumble of the V8 engine sounding less like a comforting heartbeat and more like a war drum. Meredith's laughter echoed in his ears, a cruel counterpoint to the city's symphony, a monument to going nowhere. The words had become a brand on his soul. For 2 years he had endured the subtle digs, the condescending pats on the head, the constant pressure to be someone else, all while secretly building her a kingdom. He had believed it was a shared dream, a partnership. Now he saw it for what it was, a transaction in which he was the only party investing any actual emotion. The simmering unease he'd felt for months had finally boiled over into a cold, terrifying certainty. He wasn't just being unappreciated, he was being played. He parked the truck in their building's garage, the cavernous concrete space amplifying the engine's dying growl. The doorman gave him the usual pitying nod as he walked through the marble lobby. But tonight Jack didn't feel like an imposter. He felt like an insurgent. He let himself into the apartment. The silence was absolute. A quick glance told him what he needed to know. Her purse was gone. Her car keys were missing from the bowl by the door. She was out, with Preston, no doubt, celebrating their shared wit at his expense. This was his chance. A new, chilling purpose settled over him, displacing the chaotic rage with a focused, icy resolve. He walked past their pristine living room, past the cold, sterile kitchen, and stopped before a seamless white door at the end of the hall, the one place in their home that was exclusively hers. He reached for the cold, sterile handle of her office door, a boundary he had always respected, and for the first time in his life, he was about to cross it without an invitation. The air inside her office was different, cooler, and smelled faintly of expensive paper and the light floral scent of her perfume. The room was an extension of Meredith herself, immaculate, organized, and emotionally sterile. A single white orchid sat in a minimalist vase on the corner of a vast white lacquered desk. There were no photos, no personal trinkets, nothing to suggest a life was actually lived here. It was a command center. He sat down in her ergonomic chair, the fine leather sighing under his weight. He felt like a bull in a china shop, his presence a desecration of this pristine sanctuary. In the center of the desk sat her laptop, a sleek silver machine, closed and silent. He opened it. The screen flared to life, illuminating his face in its cold blue-white glow, and presented him with a single, implacable obstacle: the password field. His heart began to hammer against his ribs. The sound of his own breathing seemed deafening in the silence. He could be caught at any moment. He typed in their anniversary, incorrect password. He tried her birthday, incorrect password. He typed the name of her childhood pet, her mother's maiden name, the brand of her favorite champagne. Nothing. Each rejection was a small, mocking laugh. He was about to give up when her own words came back to him, dripping with reverence. It's a royal oak, skeleton dial. It's a statement. It was insane, a desperate long shot born of pure, jealous rage. His fingers, clumsy with adrenaline and still bearing the faint grime of the shop, typed out the letters. Preston Royal Oak. He hit enter, bracing for failure, but instead of the familiar red shake of rejection, the screen dissolved. The desktop wallpaper loaded into view, a picture not of them, but of a pristine Miami beachfront at sunset. And in that single image, Jack knew he had just opened the door to a world of secrets he could never unsee. He stared at the screen, the tropical sunset a cruel mockery of the cold dread flooding his system. Her digital life was laid bare before him, and like her office, it was ruthlessly organized. There were folders for work, for social media content, for online shopping receipts, but one folder tucked away in the corner seemed deliberately innocuous. It was labeled Personal Projects. His mouse hovered over it, a tiny, trembling arrow of fate. He clicked. It, too, was password protected. A new wave of frustration and panic washed over him, but a grim logic took hold. If the first password was a tribute to her ambition, the second would likely follow the same theme. He typed the name of the PR firm she dreamed of starting, Sinclair Strategies. It worked. The folder opened, revealing not vacation plans or a personal journal, but a chilling collection of financial documents. There were spreadsheets with names like Ethereal Extraction and Debt Zero Protocol. No, he clicked open the first one. It was a meticulous line-by-line ledger tracking every single dollar he had ever given her, every side job bonus, every fabricated overtime payment. It was cross-referenced against statements from secret credit card accounts and offshore bank accounts he never knew existed. This wasn't the work of someone drowning in debt. This was the work of a forensic accountant planning a corporate takeover. He saw the $85,000 he had just finished paying off listed under a column titled Phase 1, Seed Capital. He was funding something, but it wasn't their future. It was hers. But it was the last file in the list, a simple document titled JS Exit Strategy, DocX, that made the air in his lungs turn to ice. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely control the mouse. He double-clicked the file. The document opened, formatted like a corporate memo. The title at the top read, Project Passport, a divorce and asset realignment strategy. The world tilted on its axis. He scanned the text, his mind struggling to process the cold, clinical language. It was a step-by-step plan. Phase 1 was the complete elimination of her public-facing debt using his income, which she referred to as the JS revenue stream. Phase 2, scheduled to commence the week after their anniversary, was the filing of divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences. There was a section on alimony calculations and a laughably low valuation of the automotive repair business, which she had estimated at a value of under $500K. But the appendix was the true kill shot. It contained screenshots of text message conversations with her friends. He saw his name over and over next to phrases that stole the air from his lungs. Human ATM. Useful fool. He was my passport, not my destination. And then, at the very bottom, was a link to a private photo gallery. He clicked it. Dozens of images flooded the screen. Meredith and Preston in Miami. Meredith and Preston on a yacht, her head on his shoulder. Meredith and Preston kissing on the balcony of the condo from the desktop wallpaper, the sunset, a backdrop to their betrayal. The surprise he had planned for their anniversary. The Porsche. The paid-in-full statement. It all evaporated, replaced by a singular, clarifying purpose. The love he had felt for her was gone, cauterized in an instant by the searing heat of her treachery. The surprise he had planned for their anniversary was dead, and in its place, a new, far more meticulous plan began to take shape, not of celebration, but of total, calculated annihilation. The transition from heartbreak to something far colder was terrifyingly swift. The man who had been shattered by the images of his wife in another man's arms was gone, burned away in a flash of white-hot agony, leaving behind a new entity forged in the chilling vacuum of his dead love. He sat perfectly still in her ergonomic chair, the pristine white office now feeling like the sterile operating theater where the autopsy of his marriage was being performed. The sunset on the screensaver was an obscene splash of color in a world that had just been rendered in shades of gray. His gaze fell again upon the title of the document, Project Passport, a divorce and asset realignment strategy. The corporate jargon, once so alien, was now brutally clear. This wasn't the emotional diary of an unhappy wife. It was a business plan for a hostile takeover of his life. He was the asset to be leveraged, the revenue stream to be exploited, and ultimately, the liability to be discarded. He scrolled back through the pages, his mind no longer clouded by pain, but sharpened by a terrifying, crystalline clarity. He saw his own fabricated stories of working double shifts and side jobs listed as anticipated income streams. He saw his sacrifices, his exhaustion, his love, all reduced to data points on her path to a new life with another man. The rage was still there, a supernova of it, but it was no longer chaotic. It had collapsed inward, becoming a dense, cold, and heavy object in the center of his being. He wasn't her husband anymore. He wasn't even her victim. He was her opponent in a game he never knew he was playing, and she had just handed him her entire playbook. His fingers, suddenly steady, moved with a mechanic's precision across the trackpad. He navigated back to the Personal Projects folder and clicked open the spreadsheet titled Ethereal Extraction. The name alone was a confession, a sneering admission of her intent. The screen filled with a grid of numbers and dates, a meticulous chronicle of his own generosity turned against him. Every extra $1,000 he'd given her for a dental emergency or a car repair was logged, not as a gift from a loving husband, but as a capital injection. He saw the wire transfers he had made to pay off her student loans, the very act he believed was the cornerstone of his grand romantic gesture, categorized under the heading Debt Consolidation for Asset Liquidity. She had been using his money to make herself a more attractive acquisition for Preston, cleaning up her own balance sheet before the merger. He scrolled down, his eyes scanning rows and rows of transactions, and then he saw it. A series of recurring monthly payments classified as consulting fees being funneled from one of her secret accounts to a shell company. He didn't recognize the name of the company, but the amount was significant, a steady bleed he had been unknowingly financing. This was beyond simple greed. This was organized, premeditated financial warfare. She hadn't just been spending his money, she had been systematically siphoning it, building a war chest for the legal battle she intended to wage against the poor slob whose greatest crime was loving her unconditionally. The name of the shell company was a dead end, a meaningless string of letters designed to be anonymous. But Meredith was arrogant, she was sloppy. He opened the computer's search history, a digital trail of her thoughts and intentions. He typed in the shell company's name and hit enter. The results were sparse, but one hit stood out. A payment portal for a high-end, notoriously aggressive divorce attorney in Manhattan, a man known in elite circles as the Shark, famous for dismantling the fortunes of unsuspecting spouses. The blood in Jack's veins turned to ice. She hadn't just been planning for a divorce. She had been retaining legal counsel for months, paying the retainer with his own money. He felt a wave of nausea as the full scope of her treachery became clear. This was a long con, a meticulously planned operation. The condescending comments about his truck, the feigned embarrassment over his job, the pressure to sell his grandfather's legacy for quick cash. It wasn't just social climbing. It was a strategy to psychologically disarm him, to make him feel small and unworthy, to ensure that when the time came, he would be too broken to fight back. He found another file, this one buried deep in a temporary folder, a scanned document. It was a draft of an irrevocable deed, transferring ownership of a small property upstate his family had owned for generations into a trust she controlled. A document she had tried to get him to sign months ago under the guise of estate planning. He now understood he had come dangerously close to being completely and utterly erased. He needed more. He needed the emotional ammunition, the proof of her contempt that would fuel him through the coming war. He found her archived emails, a library of her duplicity. There they were, in black and white, the casual cruelties he had heard whispered but never fully processed. An email to a friend from 6 months prior, "Jack is taking on more side work, bless his greasy little heart. The human ATM is finally working overtime. The debt will be cleared by summer, and then my real life can begin." Another to her sister, "I have to go to another one of his shop parties. I swear, the whole place smells like a gas station toilet. I just smile and tell everyone how authentic he is. It's the price I pay for my passport out of this life." Each word was a fresh incision, methodically dissecting the last vestiges of his affection. He saw the threads with Preston, flirtatious at first, then logistical, planning their trysts, discussing their future, mocking him. "He's completely oblivious," one of Preston's messages read. "He thinks you're stressed about credit cards while you're planning a corporate takeover." Meredith's reply was a single, devastating sentence that would become the mantra of his revenge. "He's a useful fool, but his utility is about to expire." He read it over and over, letting the poison seep into his soul. letting it extinguish every last flicker of compassion and mercy he might have had left. He closed the final email. The autopsy was complete. The cause of death was a terminal case of misplaced faith. He leaned back in her chair, the fine leather cool against his back, and for the first time since walking into this room, he felt a profound and terrifying calm. The rage had not vanished. It had simply completed its transformation, hardening from a molten, chaotic fury into a perfectly machined weapon, cold, sharp, and flawlessly balanced. He was no longer Jack Sullivan, the loving husband. That man had died in this room, bled out on the floor of her pristine office. In his place sat the sole anonymous owner of a $75 million empire, a man who understood value, leverage, and the devastating power of a well-executed strategy. He methodically opened a new browser window, plugged in a small encrypted flash drive, one he always carried, a relic of his cautious business paranoia, and began to copy everything, every spreadsheet, every email, every legal document, every last incriminating photograph. The progress bar on the screen moved slowly, a silent digital countdown to her annihilation. He was no longer the passport, he was no longer the ATM, he was the bank, and he was about to foreclose on her entire world. He slid the encrypted flash drive from the USB port of her laptop, its small metal body warm against his cold fingers. The click of its release was the first sound in what felt like an eternity, a tiny, definitive punctuation mark at the end of the long, rambling sentence that had been his marriage. He stood up, his legs stiff, and looked at his own distorted reflection in the dark screen. The man looking back was a stranger, his face a mask of grim determination. The familiar lines of exhaustion and easygoing patience completely erased and replaced by something harder, something forged in the absolute zero of betrayal. He walked out of her office, leaving the door ajar, an act of quiet desecration. He moved through the apartment not as its resident, but as a forensic investigator cataloging a crime scene. The white orchid on her desk was no longer a beautiful plant. It was a symbol of a sterile, parasitic life. The minimalist art on the wall was a monument to hollow consumerism. The entire space, once a source of quiet pride, now felt like a mausoleum for a love that had never truly existed. He didn't pause to gather any of his own belongings. They were props from a life he was shedding. He reached the heavy front door, his hand resting on the cold, brushed steel handle. He didn't look back. The soft, hydraulic sigh and the final solid thud of the lock engaging behind him was not the sound of a departure. It was the sound of an emancipation. And as he stepped into the hushed, carpeted hallway, he wasn't running from a broken home. He was marching toward a war council of his own creation. He bypassed the elevator, taking the fire stairs down 27 flights, the rhythmic thud of his work boots on the concrete steps, a primal drumbeat for the fury coursing through his veins. He emerged into the cavernous, brightly lit garage, the scent of concrete and exhaust, a welcome antidote to the sterile, perfumed air of the apartment. He walked toward the F-150, his grandfather's truck, the monument to going nowhere. A grim, mirthless smile touched his lips. They had no idea where this truck could take him. He climbed in, the familiar groan of the old vinyl seat a comforting welcome. The cab smelled of his life, of honest work, of a reality she had never bothered to understand. But he didn't reach for the ignition key. Instead, he opened the glove compartment, pushing aside a worn copy of a Steinbeck novel and a tire pressure gauge, and retrieved a small, unassuming black box. It was a military-grade encrypted satellite phone, a piece of hardware that spoke more about his true life than any pay stub ever could. He powered it on, the screen glowing a stark, functional green. He dialed a number from memory, a direct line that bypassed secretaries and receptionists. It was answered on the first ring. "Thorne?" A voice rasped, sharp and impatient. "Marcus, it's Jack Sullivan," as he said, his own voice sounding foreign to him, stripped of all warmth, all hesitation. It was the voice of a client, a commander. Asset Protection Protocol Level 5, full lockdown. The target is Meredith Sinclair. The secondary is a man named Preston Hayes. I'm sending you a drive with the preliminary intel. I want everything, full financial forensics, deep surveillance, and I want the best litigation team you have on standby. Spare no expense. There was a brief pause on the line, not of surprise, but of a predator scenting blood. Consider it done, Jack, Marcus replied, a hint of grim satisfaction in his tone. Welcome back to the game. Jack ended the call, the silence in the truck suddenly feeling heavier, charged with the immense, destructive power he had just unleashed. The drive to Queens was an automated act, his conscious mind a million miles away, strategizing, planning, and replaying every damning piece of evidence. The familiar streets of his neighborhood, the glow of the corner bodega, the rumble of the elevated train, it all felt like a scene from someone else's life. He pulled up to the darkened, unassuming facade of Ethereal Automotive, the roll-up door looking like a closed mouth guarding a priceless secret. He used a keycard and a thumbprint scanner, and the heavy door rumbled upwards, revealing the cavernous interior. The moonlight streaming through the high windows cast long, distorted shadows, making the half-restored classic cars look like sleeping prehistoric beasts. He walked past the skeletal frame of a 1961 Jaguar E-Type and the gleaming, muscular flank of a Lamborghini Miura, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. The air was thick with the familiar, comforting smells of metal, paint, and high-octane fuel. This was his real home, his fortress. He went to the back, to the unmarked steel door, and pressed his thumb against the biometric reader. With a soft hiss, the lock disengaged, and he stepped from the gritty, tangible world of the workshop into the silent, climate-controlled nerve center of his empire. His real office was a minimalist cocoon of brushed steel and smoked glass, overlooking the main floor. He sat in the high-backed leather chair that cost more than Meredith's entire wardrobe and powered on the bank of monitors. He was no longer the grease-stained mechanic. He was the ghost in the machine, and he was about to weaponize every dollar, every transaction, every secret he had ever kept. The first priority was to build a financial firewall so high and so deep that not even Marcus Thorne's most cunning counterpart could breach it. His fingers flew across the keyboard, a flurry of motion that was both furious and precise. He was a surgeon, excising a cancer. He accessed his primary holding company through a multi-layered VPN routed through servers in 3 different countries. With a series of commands, he initiated a complete asset reallocation. Millions of dollars flowed like digital rivers, diverted from vulnerable domestic accounts into newly created, anonymous trusts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. He liquidated his positions in several publicly traded companies, converting them into untraceable bearer bonds that would be held in a vault in Zurich. He severed the link to the single, modest joint checking account he shared with Meredith, leaving in it a precise balance of $1.78, the price of a cup of coffee from the cart near her office, a final petty insult. He pulled up the files on Preston Hayes's prized 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO, a car Ethereal was restoring for a 7-figure fee. He saw the 3 overdue payment notices he had previously ignored out of professional courtesy. He flagged the account, drafted a legal notice of intent to seize collateral, and scheduled it to be delivered by courier to Preston's office precisely 48 hours before the anniversary dinner. He was systematically dismantling their world, board by board, nail by nail, and the cold, methodical process brought him a terrifying sense of peace. With his empire secured and the first legal torpedo launched, he turned his attention to the architecture of the final, public execution. He opened a secure video link, and a moment later, the face of a severe, silver-haired man in a perfectly tailored suit appeared on his main screen. the background a blur of what Jack knew was a corner office overlooking Lake Geneva. "Mr. Dubois," Jack said, his voice a flat monotone, "I need to establish a new investment vehicle, an anonymous one." The Swiss banker simply nodded, his expression unchanging, a mask of professional discretion. Jack laid out the plan with cold, clinical detail. He was creating a phantom angel investor fund with an initial capital of $20 million. The fund's sole purpose was to identify and make an acquisition offer to a promising, up-and-coming PR firm. Dubois listened, his fingers tapping silently on his own keyboard. "And the target firm?" he asked, his voice a soft, cultured whisper. "Sinclair Strategies," Jack replied, the name of Meredith's dream company, the one from her business plan, tasting like poison on his tongue. "I want the offer to be irresistible, life-changing, and I want it to land on her desk the morning after our wedding anniversary." Dubois' eyebrow raised a single, almost imperceptible millimeter, the only sign of his surprise. He was not just helping Jack build a fortress, he was helping him construct the most elaborate, beautiful, and cruelest trap he had ever conceived. The official declaration of war did not arrive with a scream, but with the quiet, indifferent hum of a bicycle courier's electric motor. The young man, clad in bright spandex and a helmet that seemed alien in the gritty world of ethereal automotive, navigated the oil-stained concrete floor with a dancer's precision, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination at the monolithic skeletons of priceless cars surrounding him. He held out a crisp, legal-sized envelope as if it were a biohazard. Jack, who was deep in the meticulous process of hand-sanding the fender of a 1954 Porsche 356 Speedster, looked up, his movements slow and deliberate. He wiped his hands on an already filthy rag, the gesture a futile attempt to bridge the chasm between his world of tangible creation and the world of abstract destruction contained within that envelope. He took it, the thick, expensive paper feeling cold and unnaturally smooth against his calloused fingertips. The return address was that of a prestigious, shark-infested law firm on Park Avenue. He didn't need to open it. He already knew. He slit the seal with his thumbnail, the sound a tiny, sharp tear in the symphony of the workshop. The document inside was thick, its language a dense forest of legalese designed to intimidate and overwhelm. But the words on the first page were brutally simple. Petition for dissolution of marriage. He let his shoulders slump, forcing a ragged breath into his lungs, playing the part of the blind-sided, heartbroken husband. He scanned the pages, his eyes feigning shock and confusion as they passed over the clauses, demanding he vacate their apartment within 72 hours, and the outrageously lowball offer for his share of their marital assets, which included a valuation of his business that was less than the cost of the Porsche's original paint. He was being erased, methodically and efficiently, and as he read the cold, clinical terms of his own execution, a chilling sense of triumph settled deep in his gut, for he knew she had just willingly signed her own death warrant. He arrived at the apartment to find Meredith directing two movers with the imperious air of a field marshal. She was a vision of victorious grace in a sharp, white pantsuit, her posture ramrod straight, her expression a carefully curated mask of regretful necessity. The air, already sterile, now felt charged with a hostile energy, the silence between her commands thick with unspoken judgment. Cardboard boxes, bearing the logo of a high-end moving company, were already stacked near the door, containing what she deemed worthy of her new life. "Jack," she said, her voice soft but firm, the tone one uses on a difficult child or a slow-witted employee. "I thought this would be easier, for both of us." He just nodded, his throat too tight with feigned grief to speak. He walked past her, into the master bedroom. The space was already being purged of his existence. His side of the closet was empty, save for a few things she had deemed too worthless even to donate. His worn work boots, a faded flannel shirt, and his old canvas backpack. He methodically placed the boots and the shirt into the backpack, the familiar weight a comforting anchor in the storm of this charade. He felt her watching him, her gaze a mixture of pity and impatience. "Just take what you need for a few days," she said, a hint of condescension coloring her tone. "I'll have my lawyer send you a check for your things. We can consider it a severance package." He zipped the backpack, the sound unnaturally loud, a final grinding protest. He slung it over his shoulder, a refugee in his own home, and walked toward the door without looking back, knowing that her perception of him as a broken, homeless man was the most critical component of the trap that was about to spring shut. The law office was on the 50th floor, a glass and steel cathedral dedicated to the art of high-stakes litigation. The view of Central Park, sprawling green and impossibly distant, was meant to convey a sense of power, of being above the petty struggles of the world below. Meredith sat on one side of a vast, polished mahogany table, flanked by her attorney, a man with silver hair and a smile that never reached his cold, reptilian eyes. Preston was there too, seated slightly behind her, a silent partner in her triumph, his hand resting possessively on the back of her chair. He gave Jack a nod of such profound, patronizing sympathy that it was almost a physical blow. Jack sat opposite them, alone, his worn Carhartt jacket looking like a piece of garbage in the opulent, leather-scented room. Meredith's lawyer slid a thick stack of documents across the table. "A very generous offer, Mr. Sullivan," the lawyer purred. "Mrs. Sinclair is prepared to assume all of her own debt and is offering you a one-time payment of $250,000 for your full stake in the automotive repair business. Sign here and you can walk away free and clear." Jack picked up the Mont Blanc pen they offered him. He scanned the pages, his eyes landing on the clause that officially valued Ethereal Automotive at $500,000. It took every ounce of his self-control not to laugh out loud. He looked up, meeting Meredith's gaze. Her eyes were shining with unshed tears of pure, unadulterated victory. He uncapped the pen, its weight a satisfying heft in his hand, and scrawled his signature on the line, the black ink a stark, final commitment. As he pushed the signed agreement back across the table, he felt a surge of adrenaline, knowing his signature was not an act of surrender, but the final, irreversible arming of a weapon of unimaginable financial devastation. He stepped out of the gleaming, sterile lobby of the law firm and onto the chaotic sidewalk of 6th Avenue. The sudden sensory assault of screeching taxis, shouting vendors, and the thick, humid air of a New York afternoon was a welcome shock to his system. He was, by every definition in Meredith's world, a ruined man. He had no home, a $250,000 to his name that felt like an insult, and he had just signed away the business that was his entire life, or so they believed. A strange, exhilarating lightness filled his chest. The suffocating weight of his double life was finally gone, surgically removed by her own greed. He was no longer the dutiful husband, the human ATM, the greasy mechanic to be pitied and tolerated. He was a ghost, a phantom with a $75 million arsenal that no one could see. He walked for blocks, an anonymous figure in the river of humanity, the worn backpack a comfortable weight on his shoulders. He was invisible, underestimated, and utterly, completely free. He replayed the scene in the lawyer's office in his mind. The smug confidence on Preston's face, the triumphant gleam in Meredith's eyes, the lawyer's dismissive tone. They had celebrated his execution, never once suspecting they were standing on a trapdoor of their own making. He stopped at a street corner, the roar of the city a fitting soundtrack for the war he was about to formally declare. He pulled out his encrypted satellite phone, the device a stark piece of military-grade technology amidst the sea of consumer electronics, and sent a single, pre-written text message to a number in Zurich. It contained only one word: execute. The rooftop of Aura was a carefully engineered fantasy, a floating island of wealth and influence suspended 27 stories above the gritty reality of the Manhattan streets. The air itself seemed different up here, thinner and scented with a complex bouquet of expensive perfumes, the delicate aroma of seared scallops and the crisp, metallic tang of vintage champagne. A soft jazz trio played in the corner, their music a sophisticated, unobtrusive soundtrack to the low hum of self-important conversation and the gentle clinking of crystal flutes. Meredith was in her element, the undisputed queen of this glittering court. She moved through the crowd with a practiced, liquid grace, her $10,000 designer dress shimmering under the soft glow of the fairy lights, a beacon of curated perfection. Jack watched her from the shadows near the entrance, a ghost at his own wife's coronation. She was holding court by the glass balustrade, her back to the breathtaking panorama of the city skyline, her hand resting with casual possession on Preston's arm. Her laughter, bright and sharp, carried across the terrace, a sound that now grated on his soul like grinding metal. This was her victory party, a celebration of a successful hostile takeover he had unknowingly funded. Then he stepped forward. He moved from the shadows into the light, and the effect was instantaneous and profound. A ripple of silence spread outwards from him, a conversational vacuum that followed his path through the crowd. It wasn't just his presence, it was the transformation. Gone was the grease-stained mechanic in a worn jacket. In his place stood a man exuding an aura of lethal, predatory calm, encased in a flawlessly tailored Tom Ford suit that fit him not like a costume, but like a second skin. The dark charcoal wool absorbed the light, making him seem like a figure carved from shadow and steel. The hushed whispers followed him, a wave of confusion and reassessment. He saw the flicker of shock in Meredith's eyes, her triumphant smile freezing, then faltering as she took in the impossible sight of him. Preston's condescending smirk vanished, replaced by a guarded, hostile curiosity. Jack offered them a slow, deliberate nod, a gesture devoid of all warmth, and continued his unhurried walk toward the small stage where the jazz trio had just finished a set, the expensive leather of his new shoes making no sound on the polished stone floor. He picked up the wireless microphone from its stand, the cool metal a familiar and comforting weight in his hand, and as he tapped it, the soft chime silencing the last vestiges of chatter, he knew he was about to conduct not a toast, but an execution. His voice, when it came, was not the one they knew. It was calm, clear, and carried a resonant authority that filled the sudden, absolute silence of the rooftop. It was the voice of a man who owned rooms like this, not one who served them. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his eyes locked on Meredith, pinning her in place across the terrace. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our anniversary." He let the words hang in the air, a final cruel nod to the fiction they were all there to perform. He saw Meredith force a brittle, uncertain smile, her eyes darting nervously between him and Preston. "I've learned a lot about debt over the past few years," Jack continued, his tone conversational, almost philosophical, about its weight, its pressure, and today I'm happy to announce I finished paying one off. On cue, the massive projector screen behind him, which had been displaying a tasteful, looping video of abstract art, flickered to life. A document appeared, magnified to a colossal scale, an official bank statement. The final line highlighted in green, the words "paid in full," stamped in bold red letters next to a balance of $85. A wave of relieved, impressed murmurs rippled through the crowd. Meredith's face flooded with color, her tense posture relaxing as a look of pure, unadulterated triumph washed over her. She beamed a radiant, victorious smile and shot a quick, ecstatic glance at Preston. She thought this was his grand, romantic gesture, the public validation she craved. She was the star of the show. "But I also learned," Jack's voice dropped, the warmth vanishing, replaced by a chilling, razor-sharp edge, "that some debts can never be repaid." The screen switched. The bank statement was gone, replaced by a crystal-clear, high-resolution surveillance photograph. It showed Meredith and Preston on the balcony of their Miami condo, locked in a passionate kiss, the sunset a lurid, mocking backdrop. A collective, audible gasp sucked the air from the terrace. The clinking of glasses stopped. The music was gone. There was only the sound of a single fork clattering to the floor and the sight of the color draining from Meredith's face, her triumphant smile collapsing into a mask of slack-jawed, abject horror. If you are enjoying this story of betrayal and calculated justice, please like this video. It helps us bring you more stories like this. The silence that followed was a physical presence, a heavy, suffocating blanket that smothered the entire party. Every eye was fixed on the damning image on the screen, then flicked to Meredith, whose face had gone a waxy, translucent white, her perfect makeup suddenly looking like a clown's mask on a statue of terror. Her hand, trembling violently, rose to cover her mouth, a gesture of pure, instinctual panic. Jack let the image burn into the retinas of every one of her so-called friends, a permanent stain on her meticulously crafted reputation. "Meredith called me her human ATM," he said, his voice a flat, merciless blade of sound that cut through the stillness. "She was right. I was a reliable, consistent source of funding. But as of tonight, this bank is permanently closed." He then turned his head, his gaze shifting with surgical precision to Preston, who stood frozen, his face a mottled canvas of rage and humiliation. "And Preston," Jack said, the name dripping with a cold, clinical disdain, "regarding your 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO, the one with the rare 60-degree V12 engine and the finicky oil pump you were so concerned about, Ethereal Automotive." He paused, letting the name land with the force of a physical blow. "My company will be seizing the vehicle in the morning as collateral to cover your 3 overdue 7-figure payments. My legal team will be in touch." He saw the flicker of comprehension, then utter disbelief in Preston's eyes as the greasy mechanic he'd mocked transformed into the powerful anonymous collector who held the fate of his most prized possession in his hands. Jack turned his attention back to Meredith one last time. She was openly weeping now, not silent, dignified tears, but ugly, gasping sobs that racked her entire body, the sound echoing across the dead silent rooftop. "The divorce papers, which cite the evidence you see on the screen, will be served tomorrow, Meredith," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "Enjoy the dinner. It's all paid for." He placed the microphone gently back on its stand, turned his back on the smoldering wreckage of her life, and walked away without a second glance, leaving her to drown in the silence, a queen dethroned in the very court she had built on a foundation of his love and her lies. The true measure of a person's wealth isn't found in a bank statement or on a balance sheet, but in the integrity of their character and the value of their word. In the end, a life built on deception, no matter how beautifully decorated, is a fragile structure destined to collapse. What are your thoughts? Do you believe that true justice is about financial revenge, or is it about reclaiming one's own peace and self-worth? Let us know in the comments below. 6 months had passed, and the autumn light that slanted through the high windows of Ethereal Automotive had a different quality now. It was softer, gentler, and seemed to illuminate the space not as a clandestine workshop, but as a cathedral of steel and heritage. The air, crisp with the scent of burning leaves from somewhere outside and rich with the familiar, honest perfume of wax, leather, and curing paint, it felt cleaner, easier to breathe. Jack stood before the 1985 Ford F-150, but it was not the same truck. It was a resurrected icon, its body stripped to bare metal and repainted in a shade of cherry red so deep it looked like liquid glass. Every piece of chrome had been triple-plated, every piece of vinyl and rubber replaced with period-correct perfection. He was no longer hiding behind the facade of a manager. He was the master of his domain, and his work was no longer a means to a deceptive end, but a pure expression of his passion. The news of the fallout had reached him, of course, through quiet updates from Marcus Thorne. Meredith's career had imploded in a spectacular bonfire of public humiliation. The video of her face when the photo appeared on the screen had gone viral in her elite circles, a meme of schadenfreude among the very people she sought to impress. The phantom $20 million offer for Sinclair Strategies had been the final, cruel twist of the knife, a ghost of a future that evaporated the morning after her ruin, leaving her not just socially exiled, but psychologically shattered. Preston, having lost his prized Ferrari and a significant portion of his trust fund in a disastrous legal battle against a company he never knew Jack owned, had retreated from the social scene, a diminished figure stripped of his primary assets, his car and his arrogance. Jack felt no lingering rage, no thrill of victory, only a profound, quiet finality, the feeling of a long and painful fever that had finally broken. He ran his hand over the freshly painted fender, the metal cool and solid beneath his palm, and he realized the truck, in its silent, steadfast endurance, had taught him the final, most important lesson of all. That lesson was the fundamental, unbridgeable chasm between price and value. Meredith and Preston lived in a world of price tags, where a person's worth was calculated by the brand of their watch, the address of their condo, the cost of their suit. They had looked at him, at his simple Timex, his calloused hands, and this old Ford truck, and they had calculated his price as laughably low. They never once stopped to consider his value, the value of a legacy handed down from a grandfather, of a skill honed over a lifetime of dedication, of an integrity that could not be bought or sold. He had almost made the same mistake, believing the price of a Porsche and a paid-off debt could somehow purchase the happiness he craved for her. The betrayal, as devastating as it was, had been a brutal but necessary recalibration, forcing him to see that true wealth wasn't in the $75 million valuation of his company, but in the quiet satisfaction of a perfectly balanced engine, the trust of his clients, and the freedom to be unapologetically himself. He opened the driver's side door of the F-150. The cab no longer smelled of old vinyl and stale cigars, but of rich, new leather and the faint, clean scent of the wool headliner. He slid onto the bench seat, the engine turning over with a deep, throaty rumble that was music to his soul. He was not just Jack Sullivan, the restorer of cars. He was Jack Sullivan, a man who had restored himself. As he pulled the gleaming truck out of the garage and onto the open road, the autumn sun glinting off the hood, he knew he wasn't escaping a past or chasing a destination. He was simply driving, finally and completely, in a vehicle that was, like him, priceless.